In this video, we'll be providing an overview on how you can create a custom report. To do this, you're going to go to the Export and Import tab. In here, you're going to go to the Flexible Export. In the Flexible Export, you'll notice three main tabs. You have this first tab of Load/Save, Template tab. You have the Options tab. And then finally, you have the Template tab. In this first tab, it will have all the previous flexible exports that have been created. If you select any of these, you'll notice on the right, you have three options. You can first load it, and it'll have it so it pre-fills all of these settings for both the options and the template tab. You can select new, which will not only clear, but also take you straight to the template tab. Or you can delete it. Once you hit load, you will be able to export that flexible export. And also, if we go to this template tab, you can see that it's loaded with the pre-existing flexible export. Now you can use this load to have a starting point, and it'll give you the ability to modify it if you need. However, since we want to create a brand new one, we're going to hit new. You'll notice it clears it, and we'll start from the beginning. So first, we're going to want to go to this Options tab. And in this Options tab, it's going to ask you, one, how you'd like to output this flexible export, but then it'll ask you basic formatting issues. So in this first one, it's going to ask me how I'd like to output it. And so I can decide if I'd like to have it as a clipboard, so I can paste it into something like Excel, or I can output it as a file and save it as a .txt file. I can save it as a database or as a report. If I select report, it'll actually have it so a tab appears down here, and that's where the flexible export will go. If you do choose report, you will want to provide it a name. And so you're going to go down to this report info, and you're going to provide it a name, for now, say example. From here, we're going to go to the output by, and this is really going to be the formatting section of this. We can decide whether or not we want to export it as rows or columns. We can decide whether or not we want to include the row or column headings. We can also decide whether or not we want commas in the numbers. If you look down the Reports tab, you'll notice that by default, there are commas in the values. However, you can select this or deselect it to have it so commas are included or not included. To the right, you'll notice that you'll have the ability to include parameter notes. You'll be able to decide whether or not you want to export just the likely value only. So if you were to want to export inputs, you can tell SEER-H if you would like just the likely values. And finally, you have the ability to choose to indent the row headings. Now with these three, it's important to note that they are somewhat linked to how we want to output it. So if you want to output by rows or columns, some of these may or may not be available. So currently, since we're on columns, you'll notice that we have the ability to choose whether or not we want to export the likely value only. If we go to rows, you'll notice that that one goes to gray out, and we now have the ability to choose if we want to include parameter notes or indent the row headings. For this example, we'll choose columns. We'll choose to include the row/column headings, and we'll also choose to include commas in the numbers. Now in this bottom section, it's going to ask us which elements we'd like to include. If we're on the current work element only, that means it will only export whatever element you have selected. So in this case, if I select RF machine housing, it will only export that element. If we choose current work element plus subordinates, it will have it so if I'm on a rollup, it will export this current work element plus all the elements below it. And then finally, I can choose to export the entire project. And this one will have it so regardless of which one you're on, it will export everything in the project. Now, in addition to these, we can also decide whether or not we want to suppress elements excluded from Rollup. So if we have some elements that are outside of Rollup, we can decide to exclude those elements. To the right within this box, you'll also notice that we can decide which elements we'd like to include. Currently, all the elements are selected, but if we click on any one of them, you can see that we can deselect those, and it has it so when we go to export this estimate, it will have those elements not included in our export. For now, we'll keep them all included. And then the final formatting question it'll ask you is how you'd like the delimiter. So we can decide if we want to have a tab or a space in between our numbers. We can have a comma in between the entries, or we can even decide to create our own. So if we choose others, we can put in some of the symbols from above, or you can even use letters or whatnot. For now, we'll use tab. So now that we have set our format, we can then go to template. And in template, this is really where you're going to tell SEER-H what you would like to export from the estimate. And what you'll find out pretty quickly is that there are a ton of options to choose from here. And so we won't be going over every option, though it is suggested that when you have time, it's worth looking through at least the major categories to get an idea of what you can include in this custom export. But instead, we're going to be talking about the three main categories generically. And so you can notice at the top one, we can choose available outputs. So if we expand this, you can see we can choose things like quick estimate. If we expand that, we can choose things like total development cost, total production cost, total APOC costs, so on and so on and so on. If we go to available inputs, this is where you'll be able to tell SEER-H which inputs you would like to be included in this export. So we can choose things like probability or class adjustment, and again, so on. And finally, we can choose what work element information we want. And so this is going to be the information that's kind of tied to that work element. And so it's going to be things like work element name, work element outline number, the application you selected, maybe the standard you selected, and so on. For this example, we'll choose things like work element name. We'll choose the outline number, and we'll say application. From here, we may choose from available outputs. We may go to quick estimate and choose things like total development cost and total production cost. From available inputs, we may choose something like probability. Now, once you've selected the categories you wanted, you can actually use these on the side to make adjustments. So you can use this to move up or move down any category. You can remove any that you want. And so if we wanted to remove probability, we can hit remove and it'll take it off the list. Or we can select remove all and it'll remove all of it. Now that you're done creating it, you can export it. However, if this is a custom output you're going to be using often, you may want to save it as a template first. If we save this as a template, it will then be added to these flexible export here. So we can go to here and we can say save as template, and you'll be asked to provide two things. First, a file name and then a description. And it's strongly suggested that your file name and description be different, just so that if another user goes to use it, they can follow along pretty easily. And so in this one, we may call this one example. And for description, we may say total dev cost plus total production cost plus probability. And when we hit OK, if we go to this load/save, when we scroll down to the ease, you can see that we now have our flexible export here. So now that we have it all ready and loaded, when we go to hit export, you'll see that it's now added to the reports, because if we go back to the options tab, we had selected that it'd be output as a report. And you can see that in this case, it was output as columns. You can see the headings. You can also notice that we have the commas included. And on top of that, it's the entire project. If we decide to change our mind, we can always go to the clipboard and hit export. Go to our Excel sheet and we can paste it in Excel in here as well. And again, you can see that we have that custom output in Excel. We hope you found this video helpful. And as always, if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to the Galarath support team.